Welcome, everybody. My name is Mina Jane. I'm the director of the Ashland Public Library in Massachusetts, and I'm very excited to be here with Scott Ryan, who wrote The Last Decade of Cinema, but also all those other books. And he is, I want to say he's well known in Hollywood, but I'm not sure if he would agree with that. But we'll be talking about it. But before I get to Scott, I just want to say thanks to the Ashland, the Friends of the Ashland Public Library for supporting all of our programs. I would also like to thank Scott for letting us partner with other libraries for this program because, you know, when libraries come together, we make magic. And this is going to be like an amazing program that is maybe a bit magical. You can buy signed books by Scott from Aesop's Fable, which is our favorite indie bookstore. I will put a link to that in the chat. And if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, which is the button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. The chat tends to go by too quickly for me to keep a track of, so please put your questions in the Q&A. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this over to Scott to tell us what, you know, about the last decade of cinema, his own life, and everything that we want to know about, all of our burning questions. But I was fascinated by the fact that you started out in a video store like Quentin Tarantino. Did it happen to be the same one? Did you watch Clerks all the time?
Yeah, that's me. I'm exactly like Quentin Tarantino. We both worked at a video store, and then from there to the rest of our lives, it's pretty much the exact same experience. I mean, maybe he won a couple Oscars, but you know,
No.
what would I do with them?
I know you could win a Pulitzer.
Yeah, I'm sure I will. I'm sure I will.
I'll bet
Yes,
on
I
you.
did. It was crazy because I actually started to work at a video store in 1990, and this book covers movies from 1990 to 1999. So it sort of all was this synchronicity of coming together because this whole book came to me during COVID. I wanted to watch something. You know, we were all like desperate to watch anything and everything. But every new movie I watched, I just couldn't get through. It wasn't speaking to me. And I was just looking for something, anything to watch. And I stumbled upon the movie Awakenings with Robert De Niro and Robin Williams, directed by Penny Marshall. And I had seen it, but I hadn't seen it in like 30 years. And I was like, I'm just going to watch Awakenings. It blew me away. I totally got caught up in the characters. I loved it and was over. I looked to see when it was made, and it was 1990.
Mhm.
And this set me on this path of watching 90s movies. And the more that I watched it, I just thought, I really think there's a book in this. And I did a little search, and there was 36,000 movies made in the 90s. So I thought, hey, I can do that. I'll just watch them over the weekend. Immediately, I decided you cannot watch 36,000 movies. New plan. I came up with a list of 160 movies that I kind of spread out through the decade, kind of looking at around 10 to 12 a year.
Mhm.
And I had these rules because everybody wants to know, like, how did you pick the movies that were in the book? And these are not my favorite movies. That's not the point of this. These were movies that spoke to me now at the difference in where we are in 2024 versus where we were in the 90s as the kind of art that's being created.
Mhm.
So the movie had to say something to me. It had to have something for me to write about. So I whittled those 160 movies down to 25 movies. So the book has 25 major essays covering at least two movies a year, taking you from 1990. I start with Goodfellas and Pretty Woman. Those are the first two movies that I cover. And then
They're
it goes
exactly
all
the
the way.
same.
Yeah,
'Cause
yeah. And you know, that's another thing that I love. Like there's a chapter, I think it's 91, that I'm covering Terminator 2 with Arnold Schwarzenegger and The Prince of Tides with Barbara Streisand.
Mhm.
That's the same year. And so in some of these ways, you could be like, whoa, I'm gonna like snap my neck going from Goodfellas to Pretty Woman and T2 to Prince of Tides. But this is my point of the book. Everything was unique. Everything wasn't the same. You could have a cyborg and it's a good movie. It's not just an action adventure movie. It
Mhm.
was actually one of my favorite movies to write about because what that movie is really about is what happens when humans turn over everything to technology. It is such a warning
Mhm.
for what we've become with our phones. I'm glad we have the technology because otherwise I couldn't see Denise Cole from Peabody, Massachusetts. Denise Cole wouldn't even know who I was. But now we can come on here and do this. But also, I don't know, Karen Owen, she might be scrolling at her phone right now and not even listening to me. And I'm so entertaining. But she just wants to see maybe her high school person went, what'd they have for lunch? And that's really what Terminator 2 is about. Now, it is certainly hid in an action movie. You can totally watch that and see trucks blow up, just like movies today. But as we get into the middle of the decade, the movies become more controversial, more willing to take risks. And the more a movie took a risk, the more the audience was going to care.
Mhm.
And as soon as we care about the character, everything changes for you when it comes to art. And, one of the movies I cover is Menace to Society, which was a movie by the Hughes brothers.
Mhm.
And it is about living in life in the 90s in South Central LA. I grew up in a little small town called Massillon, Ohio. It's a really tiny little town. I knew nothing about South Central LA. When you see a movie like that, or I watched every Spike Lee movie when I was working at the video store, it taught me about a world that I wasn't going to learn about. How we do things now is we only stay in our bubbles. And every movie is made to make us all inclusive, all welcome, but not threatening us at all. And a movie doesn't really threaten us. Like we can feel, you might do this and you might jump, you might grab onto something, you might cry, you might laugh, but then the movie's over and you're just fine. You're okay. It was just a movie. That's what the 90s was about. The other reason it's called the last decade of cinema was this was the last decade when movies actually came out on 35 millimeter. Every movie covered in this book was actually shot on film, and it's beautiful. I mean, all due respect to digital, I know we all love to stream our music. There's nothing wrong with Spotify. I'm glad that I can sample something new, but man, when I put on my vinyl record and I'm listening to my music and I'm blasting it, I'm turning my Stephen Sondheim Broadway cast albums all the way up. It's different. You feel it different. And that's the same way from 35 millimeter to digital.
Can I ask a question about that?
I love questions. Let's
Okay.
do it.
How much of that is nostalgia versus quality?
You're saying the nostalgia for wanting 35 millimeter?
Yeah, film or vinyl or any of that. How much of that is us just being like, oh, those were the good old days?
So I love this question because I am not a nostalgic person at all. And it's really hard for me because I have to battle that because I say in the book, the 90s was not the best time of my life. Right now is the best time of my life. I'm doing what I was meant to do. I'm getting to write and I run a publishing company and I'm surrounded by art. When I was in the 90s, as much as working at Video Time was a pretty sweet job, it wasn't where I wanted to be. I sort of had aspirations to be more. So I don't have nostalgia for that time period. And I wouldn't naturally have nostalgia for 35 millimeter, mostly because it's hard to see it. I'm really big into the world of Twin Peaks. I used to run a magazine about Twin Peaks called The Blue Rose, and I've done a couple books like we've got over here. We've got Lost Highway and Fire Walk with Me. So I travel around with a lot of David Lynch movies, and I'm lucky enough to get to I see someone, I'm getting distracted, but I just see that someone says that Christopher Nolan shoots in film. You are correct. There are some people that shoot in film, but the problem is that doesn't mean that you're going to see it in film. So most of the theaters have long discarded their 35 millimeters. So they may be shooting it in film, but you're watching it in digital. And what happened is I went to Chicago at the Music Box Theater, and I got to watch all of David Lynch's work in 35 millimeter and then interview people afterwards. Well, I'd seen these movies a million times at home. The picture, it was like I'd never seen it before. I'm going to go deep cut and just ignore this if you don't get it. But if you know the movie Blue Velvet by David Lynch, there's a guy who wears a really yellow suit. He's kind of known as the Mustard Man.
Mhm.
And, whatever, I've seen that yellow suit on my Blu-ray 100 times. In the theater, that yellow comes right. I mean, there's something about light shooting through film, and the colors are different, and the feeling you get are different. There's a strobe scene in Fire Walk with Me. When you watch it at home, it's just flashing lights. When you're in the theater, those lights are hitting you because that light is actually strobing against you.
Mhm.
It's not about nostalgia. It is a true feeling that you get from film. And film started way back in the early 1900s. So by the time we were in 1990, these people who were making films, they were the top. They were the top of their craft.
Mhm.
And so those films are just beautiful. Yes, you can do a lot of cool things on digital, but I know. It is true that the Music Box does have digital. Someone's telling me that they do. Yes, but they showed things in 35 millimeter, and it makes a difference.
So what made you go with that concept of what was happening in the 90s in the movies versus what's happening right now? Like you could have just written, these essays about like great films, but you made it a, sort of compare and contrast. Why?
Well, because you had to have something to say. I mean, it's interesting. Like, there's a lot of really good movies in the 90s. And then when I thought about it, I'd be like, what would I write? I'd say, that was funny. I mean, there's nothing interesting
Yeah.
about that. Like, I'm out immediately. But like a movie like Eyes Wide Shut, um, I still don't know what it's about. Like, I mean, I kind of like I put something forward, but it really makes you feel a way. The Ice Storm is a movie that probably most of you have not heard of. It's by Ang Lee, who got more famous doing Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, but it's a drama with Kevin Kline and Sigourney Weaver.
Mhm.
And it's very much about marriage, and it's set in Watergate, and you get put in this uncomfortable position about marriage and how difficult it can be to raise children and all these things. There was so much to say when I saw that movie. Like there was something to write about.
Mhm.
So that was the idea. I wanted to not like in all of my books, I never knock something down. I want to lift something up. So what I'm hoping is that when you read this book, you'll see that I'm lifting up Goodfellas or Pulp Fiction or Before Sunrise. I'm not kicking down the superhero movies. I want to kick down the superhero movies. Uh, I mean, I'm over superhero.
Well, you can have both, I guess, but it seems like the superhero movies are taking over the world, so people don't have access to those more interesting movies. I want to ask you about that you had said that the movie about marriage and you said that those kind of movies wouldn't happen anymore, but like there was a movie recently with Scarlett Johansson and Adam Driver called The Marriage Story or something like that. Now, how do those two compare in terms of timing?
Sure. So thank you so much for that question. I'm going to answer it, but I want to say to Joan O'Brien, I'm so glad that you love the ice storm because I love the ice storm. And it's nice that someone out there is great.
Oh,
So anyway,
I do want to
yes.
interrupt for 1 second and say I'm very glad Denise is still here because she lives in Peabody, Massachusetts,
And I said Peabody.
as everybody does. So,
To be fair, it's because I want to win a Peabody Award. So I thought if I said that, it would help with the voters.
okay, all right. Well,
So that's why I did it.
yeah, we will send this to the voters so they know.
Yeah, that's why I was going to do that. So here's the thing about Marriage Story, which I love because they do sing two Stephen Sondheim songs, and all of my books, all these books that you see behind me, even the football book, I always start every book with a quote from Stephen Sondheim because I pick a quote that fits my book. So that's where I go for all of my solace in the world.
Mhm.
So I do like that there's two Sondheim songs in it, but the Marriage Story is a great example. It's only sad. It's only one thing. In The Prince of Tides is the movie that I pick as this example. The Prince of Tides is really funny. Like when you watch The Prince of Tides, I guarantee you are going to laugh out loud at least 3 times. Probably more than 3, but I can think of 3 right now. I've seen the movie in the theater a couple times, and it always gets huge laughs. That has totally erased from movies. Now a movie is funny or it's a drama. Like The Power of the Dog is such a great example that everybody went crazy for that movie. Like, are you kidding me? It just drove me crazy. Like every single person cannot be miserable. Like in everyone's life, even if you're at the worst point of your life, usually something happens that you laugh. A funeral's a great example. You could be devastating, but your cousin makes you laugh, and then you laugh, and then you start crying. That's what life is about.
Mhm.
So an example like Marriage Story, it's just now dramas are one feeling, one emotion, because I don't think they think we're smart enough that we can go up and come back down. But I did like Marriage Story. Did you want to argue with me? I feel like you want to argue with me.
I do kind of want to argue with you
Oh, yeah,
because,
bring it.
yeah, well, okay, so everybody in the group, you feel free to put things in the Q&A or in the chat about this, because I think there is room to talk about, right, currently things being like dramedies or, a mix of things. Maybe not as well done, but I don't remember laughing at Prince of Tides at all. I remember being horrified by it.
And you should be horrified by it. But the reason you were horrified by it was because you laughed as well.
I might.
So I'm going to give you an example. You want an example, or is it too specific?
No, do it.
And it's my favorite scene, and I talk about like what an amazing director Barbara Streisand is in this movie. It's that's funny, someone's yelling me. Yeah, the dog food, good job. But that's not the one I'm going to tell.
Oh, of course. Thank you.
The idea of the mother is taking her son to the richest man in the town, and the mother is very low class, but she doesn't know it. And so the son has to go in with the richest man in town, and the mother's going to wait outside. And the guy goes in, and the son's walking down the hall, and the mother says, "That rug, it's from the Orient." And the kid's like, "What?" Like he's just a kid. And then she's like, "From the Orient," and she's like overdoes it. And you let your guard down, and it cuts to the dad slapping the kid across the face right away when he comes in. That is why you feel that slap. You don't feel the slap because the kid gets slapped, because the mother was being so the mother. Like she thinks she's above everything, and she's saying something that a woman of class would never say in public. And the dog food would have been a better one. So good job, Thomas Shim. I should have gave the dog food example, but that's the one I gave.
Oh,
Jojo Rabbit is a good one. I do like that, but I didn't say there are no good movies ever. This is where I get in trouble because people want to throw out one. I'm talking about an overall trend. Like I said, I kind of found 160 of these. I would submit there could be one movie a year now, but back in the 90s, it was just film after film. We expected it, we demanded it. And I'm just going to try to win one more point. from this, and it's that in 1994, the top 10 grossing films of 1994, all 10 of them were unique, non-sequel, non-superhero, non-connected to anything else. They were 10 new original ideas. In 2022, all of the top 10 were sequels or connected to something else. And that's what I'm talking about.
Wait.
Yes.
What list are you looking at though? Because you must be looking at what made the most money.
For that, the example I'm giving you right there, I'm giving you what made the most money. And that's the only way you can use to say what was popular. Because that's the other thing. My book is not about the most artful movies made in the 90s. These were movies that were playing at a local mall. All of these movies were accessible to everyone, and a lot of it through video. So, who's next? Oh my gosh.
Okay,
They're coming after me. I don't know if I can take it. I thought this was the library. I thought it was a safe space.
well, libraries are a safe
No, I'm just kidding.
unless you come at our movies, apparently.
Right. No, I actually love this. And also, I love that we're having this debate, which was the point of the book, because I want us to take movies seriously again. Like, it's hard for me to take seriously a movie where someone's wearing a cape.
Sorry, I love superhero movies, so I'm gonna have to recuse myself on that one.
Okay, good. It's okay.
M asks, what Sondheim song encompasses how you feel about 90s movies? And can you sing a little bit of it for us, please?
The quote that I use is from Comedy Tonight. And I don't want to get there. So it's something erratic, something dramatic, something for everyone, a comedy tonight. And something for everyone is really the point. So what we're arguing about is you guys finding a movie here or there that, of course, it's still happening, but I'm talking about the overall trend that there was something for everyone. There was something for grandma to go see. There were romantic comedies. There were so many romantic comedies. When's the last time a romantic comedy like was huge and everybody was seeing it? When was there a Pretty Woman or Sleepless in Seattle or You've Got Mail? And those movies weren't just for females or something. Everyone loved it. Like, I mean, I love Sleepless in Seattle, and Pretty Woman, the subplot is all about business. So they weren't made for one thing. It was for everyone. But like I said, it's for everyone at an intelligent level, like moving things upward, not dumbing things down so it's for everyone. I'm saying there are examples. Not everyone's going to like Pulp Fiction, but if you didn't like Pulp Fiction, you could see Shawshank Redemption or maybe Reality Bites.
Very difficult movies to watch in general for me. But I have this curious question, or not a question, is a comment about how Denise says, no, somebody says, anyways, I'm gonna miss it. That all the movies weren't made by Disney either. So like, is there a difference in production companies that everything seems to be like of the top four, like in books, there's the top three now. Is it the same in production companies? Was there more before?
Of course. And this is a big problem because if I own some huge company that makes $1 billion, why do I want to make Swingers that's only going to make 2 million? Like, why wouldn't I want everything to make 100 million or, 400 million? And that's the problem we see in everything. And I can say that as a publisher, my first book was Last Days of Letterman. I don't know why it's backwards. It's the one that's there. And we were trying to sell it, and that's all we had to start. And every publisher we went to said, you have to make $1 million in sales and have 20 books for us to start distributing you. And I'm like, I just started. Like, who would start out that way? And it was the same way with movies. Swingers is the movie that I focus on with that, where they made that whole movie for $250,000 from a really small company. And then, yes, Miramax picks it up and puts it out. But what Matt Damon talks about with Good Will Hunting is that they only made half their money from ticket sales. They made the other half from DVD or VHS rentals and purchases. And that's all gone now because no one makes any money when something is streamed. So that's caused a lot of it as well.
Mhm.
And you know what, Joan O'Brien? Yeah, you're right. I am a wealth of information. Unfortunately, it's all useless information. Like helps nobody except this is what's in my head.
I think it's helping me get a remembered perspective of how I felt about films back then in the 90s and how I feel about them now, actually. So you do have some worth, and I think you should embrace that. JD asked, did you find that it was easier to hear and understand the dialogue in 90s movies than it is now? The music now is so loud, I cannot hear dialogue.
Oh my gosh, it is so true. And it's because they have forgotten how to mix. And so much of that has to do with mixing. And now the dialogue, honestly, is it that important in these movies? It's so pathetic. It breaks my heart. So I think a lot of it has to do with the way people are mixing things. And it's again, that craft is going away. If you're only adding pew, 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 and that's what your focus comes, that is where they're spending the time on the sound. And
Mhm.
they're putting that all in, it's just swallowing up, which the score can be the same way.
So I have a question about genre about movies, because what you're saying is that in the 90s there was this wide plethora of genres of movies that people liked and would go to. For me, it feels like we're having a moment with horror, that's a place where people are experimenting with telling different stories, things like that. I don't know if you feel like that or if there's a different genre going on now that could potentially be a little bit more flexible.
It's why I didn't cover horror in my book. So my book does not have documentary horror or animation. And the reason is because those are so siphoned off that audience is still there. But I would say that Jordan Peele, his movies, you know, I don't know anything about Jordan Peele, but I know he loves 90s movies. I know he came up on these and he wants to say something. And the only way you can say something now is if you hide it. Because that was the other thing about 90s movies is that the artist was not held accountable for their character. And the
Hmm.
example that I like to give for this is Unforgiven. So I cover Unforgiven in 1992. It is directed by
Clint Eastwood, right?
yeah, I mean, Denise Cole and I should really be friends because she's talking about David Mamet, State and Maine, which I love that movie. And I cover Glenn Ross in my book because I have 25 main essays, and then in the back I have 30 short ones because I couldn't get it. I couldn't just do the 25.
Mhm.
So they're in there, but I'm getting distracted. It's hard. This is what I'm saying. Like you can't have all this Terminator 2 stuff on the side. Um, but Clint Eastwood makes a movie about a town where the sheriff does not allow guns. The only one in the town who's allowed to have guns is the sheriff. That's Gene Hackman. And the truth is, it's just a plot point to have a Western so Clint Eastwood could come in with his guns and save the women at the saloon.
Mhm.
Think about if someone made a movie today about a sheriff who wasn't going to let guns in a town, they would lose their mind.
Mhm.
Immediately, that movie would become political. And I really searched through papers in 1992 to try to find someone who said Clint Eastwood's trying to take my guns, which there was none of it because Clint Eastwood would not try to take your guns. It's
Right.
just a plot point. It's a plot point so the women have to hire someone out of town to save them. But
Mhm.
it's now we don't view things that way. We think everything is political, and then the actor, the director, the writer, they think, right now a studio would say, let's not have it be that. Let's say that everyone's gun fell down a well at the same time. Yeah, that's a good one. And then you're watching a movie that you're just like, this has no basis in reality. And I feel like I see that all the time now, where you just feel the writer's hand come up and guide your head around. And I don't want to know that there is a writer. I want to think these are real people.
Mhm. What about for actors back in the 90s? Do you think that, like you just mentioned, Gene Hackman, who was known for, to me, for Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and yet here he is in Unforgiven. So in the 90s, did actors have more ability to do those kind of really different kind of roles?
I mean, definitely. And we had movie stars. I mean, and it really is great to see these people work. And I don't cover this in the book because my rule was I could only pick one movie a director. But another Clint Eastwood is Bridges of Madison County with Clint Eastwood and Meryl Streep. Meryl Streep, who, of course, she's still good. She's still Meryl Streep.
Mhm.
But I mean, her performance in that movie is incredible. Nick Nolte in The Prince of Tides is one of the best of the year.
And
Ethan Hawke,
Nick Nolte was doing like action movies. So for him to turn around and do Prince of Tides to me was like amazing.
and he's so good. He's
Mhm.
so good in it.
Mhm.
One of the things that I never tell, but I'm going to tell because everyone's coming at me. One of the things I do in the book is I
Sorry, Gene,
never
got my genes wrong. Gene Hackman, right? Was not in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but Gene Wilder, I think of is for like not the Monty Python movies, Mel Brooks.
uh, Mel Brooks, yeah.
Oh, I'm
And
totally confused. Ignore
uh,
me.
but there is a documentary right now about Gene Wilder that looks pretty good. I'm going to check it out. Um, Nick Nolte wasn't better in Affliction. He's good in Affliction, but again, Affliction is a one note. It actually is from back then, but it's the ups and downs of The Prince of Tides. I mean, it's such a horrific film, but it's also the most beautiful love story. It's also, as I say, it's funny. It's also so much about parenting. You can learn so much about the things you do in front of your kids, how much they matter, and how long those things can come around. I mean, there's so much to learn from movies like The Prince of Tides, Shawshank Redemption, and Cider House Rules, three movies that are based on books.
Mhm. Yes. And I apologize for my gene confusion, but
It's
I'm
fine. You
having
know what? Everyone's allowed to make mistakes. I'm found out recently I'm the last American that makes mistakes, but now I know you make them too. So
yeah.
I'm going to grab everything for a second and I'm going to do a pitch about the library and then we'll get back because I want to be sure we have time. I don't want to miss my library thing. And I feel like I have people. We'll see. We're at 110. Maybe this will drop everyone. The library is so important right now because it's the last place where truth is being captured and someone like me who wants to work on something can find the truth because they keep newspapers and they keep magazines or whatever. They have books where you can go and do research. And I have a book that's out right now. It's called Maslin Against the World. This is about a high school football team from my hometown. They won the state championship. And I was covering it, and there were a lot of articles online. And when it came time to write the book, I knew I had read articles. All those things were taken down. They were up the morning after the game,
Mhm.
but they were gone. The internet isn't going to keep things for us, and who knows what's true and what's not. For me to find out what people said or if I wanted to cover something, I had to go to the library and get the newspaper and actually go through where they scan it or some places keep it. I wouldn't be able to write this book if it wasn't for the library because believe me, the corporations that are putting newspapers online behind paywalls that don't even let you read them anyway, they're deleting that stuff
Mhm.
because they don't care if it happens forever, but the library really does. And someone's saying there's an internet archive, but I am from Ohio originally. They're not doing it in Ohio anymore. So the newspaper is only giving some of the articles to that database, and they're all owned by Gannett, which is the USA Today. It all flows down from them. just because it's on that Internet Archive, they're not putting every article up there. They're
Right.
not, everything that's in the paper is not going up there. Now, I can only speak for Ohio. I'm not saying that they're doing it everywhere, but I have a feeling Gannett is doing it everywhere. So unless people, you pay your taxes to the library, always vote for a levy for the library, because those people who are really keeping that newspaper, that's the only way our history is going to be kept. And we stayed at 110. I lost no participants with me
Awesome.
teaching
Excellent.
at the library.
Yes, you can always find a safe place at the library and do your research with us. So M asks, can you talk about some of your interviews and what was something exciting to learn from the folks you talked to?
Yes, I like that question. I got to interview Tiger Williams, who wrote Menace to Society. I interviewed Alexander Payne, who directed recently The Holdovers, but he directed a movie called Citizen Ruth.
Mhm.
Interviewed Patricia Arquette from True Romance.
But
Natasha Gregson Wagner was in a movie called Two Girls and a Guy. And my big interview that means the world to me is Helen Childress, who wrote Reality Bites, which came out in 1994.
Mhm.
And during our interview, I brought up that I still have a Reality Bites towel. Am I losing it?
A little bit. Oh, nope,
Here
looking
we go.
good. Oh,
I have a Reality Bites beach towel.
oh my
And
gosh.
during our interview, we were Zooming. I just pulled this up to wipe my head.
Uh-huh.
And she just started to crack up. She's like, "What do you have?" Because she was telling me that no one really cares about Reality Bites. And I was like, no, people my age that are Gen X, it was the first movie that really covered Gen X. Like,
Mhm.
it was the first time I saw myself on the screen.
Mhm.
And to get to have that interview with Helen Childress, to me, that is the centerpiece of my book, is because Reality Bites is also set in the 90s. It's very 90s.
Mhm.
Um, so
I think
I
of I think of that and Clerks when I think of, what was happening for that Gen X generation at the time.
definitely.
And I mentioned that before. So we have some questions about sci-fi, which I will get to in a second. But Alana says, you mentioned Madison County. Was there a different view of morality in the 90s versus now? And I want to add to that and say, like, morality in terms of like what we would allow in our films.
So in the 80s, all the movies were very moral. And if you watch an 80s movie, and since you guys are loving to prove me wrong, go get them. Tell me an 80s movie that doesn't have a happy ending. And it doesn't mean that someone doesn't die. It means that the bad person is punished, where the bad person gets away with it. Like, you take Wall Street, which, Gecko, Michael Douglas, was a big bad guy, but he gets arrested at the end. Morality always happened. In the 90s, that went away. A lot of it had to do with Quentin Tarantino. Not only does he not have the good guys win in his movies, there are no good guys. Like, there's literally in Pulp Fiction no good guys. Everyone is a criminal. And it was okay. We kind of rooted for them. We're all right with it. A movie like Train Spotting, when I watched that one, I didn't cover it in my book, but there was a scene where someone gets high and they have a little baby just crawling around them while they get high. Scenes like that would not be allowed to be in movies now,
Mhm.
because you have this moral police, like I said, where someone would say, that director's saying you should get high in front of the baby. And it's like, no, what they're saying is, if you're someone who's addicted to drugs, you actually don't care if your baby is there. That's an addiction. If you want to tell a movie about addiction, you have to tell. There was no moral police in the 90s that were stopping you from doing that. And in a lot of my interviews, that's what I talk to the writers about, um, especially Tiger Williams, who wrote Menace to Society, because he said there are so many people that say, if you release this movie, people are going to kill each other at the movie theater. There's going to be gang wars. And he's like, but is that our fault? Like, is that something we're doing? This is the truth. We're telling a true story. And that movie came out. I don't know if it would today. I don't know how that would be. I don't think
So
they're making movies like that.
are you saying that in the 90s and now we're talking about the Gen Xers, people knew the difference between reality and fiction. Well, movie producers understood that people who were watching their movies could tell the difference between reality and the fiction of the story.
I mean, I don't know. I think I don't remember feeling that way. I don't think it was a thing.
Mhm.
I don't ever remember, like, I don't know. I talk about Spike Lee really pushing buttons. I talk about that in the book when I cover Malcolm X, that he's a button pusher. So people would say that about Spike Lee, okay, that his movies were gonna anger you. But nobody thought he was trying to do some agenda or something. I just don't feel like that was a concept in the 90s.
Mhm.
So I don't know that it was even that, like, I mean, kind of, I feel like Gen X was too cool for school to really say that a movie was gonna affect them in that way, but of course it really did. And they're talking about Do the Right Thing, which certainly that's actually an 80s movie. So it's not in my book, but it certainly could have been.
Mhm. I actually have a signed book of Malcolm X by Spike Lee and oh my gosh,
Wow.
Denzel Washington. I
What? How'd you get that?
They were at a book signing in DC where I lived, so I had to be there. I'm a librarian through and through.
Wow, that's
I
incredible.
know. It's in my special pile, my special
I would,
bookshelf.
yeah. I guess a signed book for me isn't going to mean anything to you. You'd be like, you're no Denzel. I get it.
That's right. Well, I mean, you're sort of like there with the chin, but other than that, no. But
Yeah,
but no, I mean, I think signed books are gold. It honestly doesn't matter who signs them, but that one is a special one to me.
definitely.
So what uh what was your favorite movie to watch for this book?
So I'm going to go with Shortcuts, which
Oh,
is Robert Altman. They're all based on Raymond Carver stories. It is not a movie that I'd seen a bunch of times in my life. I certainly saw it when it came out, and I even write in the book that he had a movie called The Player that was much more of a critical and box office success. But then he followed that up by doing Shortcuts. And like Shortcuts is there's talking about Silence of the Lambs had a happy ending, but again, that would be the 90s. 90s could have happy endings or not have happy endings. I was saying find me an 80s movie that doesn't have a happy ending.
I am racking my brain because I'm a total
I
child.
really can't do it. And to be fair, I didn't come up with that. You know, I quote Quentin Tarantino writes
Sophie's
about that.
Choice. Sophie's Choice.
Is that 80s?
I don't know.
I feel like Sophie's Choice is 70s, but I'm not an expert on 70s and 80s. And
All right, so
bless everyone, 106 people have the internet. I don't go to the internet for good.
okay.
I like to wonder. Isn't it horrible? I never look up something to see.
All right. Well,
I
I am challenging you all to find out if Sophie's Choice, which did not have a happy ending, was in the 80s or the 70s. I'm
up 1982, so it is early. It was probably written in the 70s, but I can say Ordinary People I just watched last night, and it has a happy ending.
Does it?
Yeah, again, or yes, it's such a good movie. I'd never seen it before. Isn't that horrible? But I just watched it. But Timothy Hutton comes out at the other side, and one would say that the mother was the bad guy. That's a simplistic answer. But in the end, she does move on, and it kind of frees them. So it's not about having an ending that isn't that you don't cry. It's about an ending where what should happen should like it's satisfying even if it's unsatisfying. I don't know if I'm saying this
I
correctly,
don't
but
know. Like, remember what was that movie with the Usual Suspects? Was that the 90s?
right? That's
Yeah,
90s movie.
that ending was bomb.
Yeah, the thing about Usual Suspects that's in the back of my book, and that's a great example of a movie that there's really nothing to write about. Like all you can write about is the end, and I don't want to give away the ends of the movies I cover. The only movie in my book that I spoil, I'm pretty sure this is true, is Shawshank Redemption, which I feel like by now everybody's seen. But the whole point of my essay is talking about how they craft that ending.
Mhm.
And so I give you a warning, but beyond that, I try not to spoil the movie, so I couldn't really do Usual Suspects. Someone talks about shortcuts in Magnolia. Both of them are in my book. Magnolia ends my book, really. That's my last big essay, and I think it's the penultimate or the ultimate 90s movie. Everything seems to be rolling to it, and Shortcuts and Magnolia are sort of brother and sister to each other in some ways, but I don't know. I guess I like Magnolia better, but I really enjoyed Shortcuts, which that was the longest answer ever. Did she ask that like 12 minutes ago? I think 12 minutes ago she asked me.
Yeah, I'm going to say that Thomas in the chat is cheating by saying Empire Strikes Back doesn't have a happy ending because it's not the ending. It continues. The story continues.
And yeah, and that is one of the things that I think is the other thing about movies today. They don't have endings. They just go to the next movie. Like, they just keep going. Like maybe, yeah, now they don't catch the bad guy in Harry Potter 1. It takes them to Harry Potter 12 to do it. But like even that doesn't end. Does any movie end anymore? They're gonna reboot it eventually, which is
But how much of that is because some of the movies you're talking about were based on books, and some of those books are long series. So you already know that it's not going to end. Like a Quentin Tarantino, it's all complete. It's all one. It's all done, right? I mean,
Right.
Reservoir Dogs. Oh my God. I could go on. But yeah, like, is it because they were based on books that they don't end?
Well, that's not, I mean, the Cider House Rules ends. So those are different. It's because you're in that genre of superhero, whether it's Harry Potter, he's a superhero. He may not be Batman, but it's all the same thing. You're not based in any reality. You're not having the true character development of a full-on drama, like, where you're getting characters that we care about, like in The Birdcage or something, or Before Sunrise, which we haven't talked about. So those are different things, but they don't end. They keep going. Even when things do end, they're just going to bring it back. It's the same thing. And I just don't like that. I want to see something that I just never saw before and really opens me up.
Yeah. Alice wants to know, what is the name of your football book again?
It's called Maslin Against the World.
Okay. I'll put that in the my recap email to everybody.
And I wrote it with Becca Moore. She was the coach's wife, and we interview all the coaches, and it's really a story about small town. This is a really small team that all they wanted to do was win the state championship. It's been 53 years, and they have to go up against all these private schools, and it's just the story of that. It's good.
I want to ask you, because you've mentioned the superhero movies a bunch of times. What about in the 90s? It seemed like there were a lot of mafia movies. Like you started with Goodfellas, and then there was a bunch more. I can't remember all of them, like Scarface and Casino and things like that. So was that sort of like the thing at the time?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Pulp Fiction, everybody tried to copy it, that like there was Out of Sight. And that's what I mean by they didn't have to have happy endings and they didn't have to have moral characters. Way a long time ago in this chat, you said it would all like go by, and you're right. Someone talked about 70s movies, and of course in the 70s that was that way. The way that I distinguish from the 70s to the 90s, and this was true of Ordinary People, which, as I said, I just watched 2 days ago. It was great, but it felt old. And the 70s movies just feels old. The cinematography, it's not as good. The camera, it's not that they didn't know how to shoot it, but the actual technology of that lens of capturing it, it's not quite as good. They didn't have lights that were quite as good. They didn't know how to score movies that much. If they had a bad guy in it, they're probably going to go bump, 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 bum, and you're out of that now.
Yeah.
Where in the 90s, you have more of a score that might reflect the plot, but doesn't hand you the plot. And that's the main difference between 70s and 90s.
So I was going to say that Thomas and I could probably be friends because he likes Princess Bride. but then he date checked me. So, no.
Right. Yeah. Thomas is gonna have his phone up when you talk.
He said Scarface is 1983. Fine, fine. I'm a little off.
Yeah.
Um,
And now that is one of the things I say in my book very clearly that of course movies from 1989, what's the best romantic comedy of all time? When Harry Met Sally. It's from 1989. So already that's not in. No part of this book is saying the 90s was the only time there were good movies. That is not my contention at all. My contention is this was the last whole decade when popular movies were made for adults and were different than the next thing. You're right, there were a lot of mafia movies, but you could go see something else. You didn't have to only see mafia movies, where we're kind of living in a time where, for me, it's pretty much all the same kind of movie, or it's a remake, and I don't want to see them hold the lion over the edge. I only need to see a monkey hold the lion over the edge one time. I don't need to see it 4 different times.
and we're back to Disney. Yeah, no, that's very true. Um, Emsa asks, is there's such a throwback to the 90s now. What, if anything, do you hope Gen Z will take away from your book?
Um, I can't imagine someone from Gen Z reading my book. I do feel like this book, that a young person probably would say, I don't need to listen to that old guy. Um, but if they could get past it, I think it would be that art really mattered to my generation. I don't think it does to this generation as much. I don't, and I say in my last essay, which is called Fear Conquers Art, that's the last essay in the book. I say maybe Gen X put a little bit too much into movies and music and television because it meant the world to me, as you can see by the books I've done. I mean, Letterman and Moonlighting and Twin Peaks, and you know, that was my whole world. This generation, they aren't as into that, and they're more aware of political things, and they're getting involved earlier. So there's not there's no judgment here. This is just a look at these movies, and I would hope that they would say, like, I don't know, maybe, you know, let's watch Before Sunrise.
Mhm.
Let's try Goodfellas, or maybe I'll give The Cider House Rules a watch.
Do you think that there's something to the fact that that was probably the last decade where people really had the shared experience of going to theaters together as groups of kids, families, any of that? Because like now that doesn't happen. We're all watching at home on Netflix or whatever, and we're not having a shared experience.
Yes, I talk about that a lot, and especially like in the video store. You would be holding, you're just sitting there and you're looking at Clueless, and someone says, "Hey, that's actually good." And you're like,
Mhm.
"Is it?" And then you're talking to a stranger and they're kind of saying, and then you tell them, like, "Oh, yeah, like you get the Big Lebowski. It's not Fargo, but it's good." And that can't happen when I'm at home scrolling, which is the worst word. I don't
Mhm.
want to scroll. Ugh, that sounds horrible. And then they say, well, the algorithm is suggesting it to you. Get out. They're just telling you what they own. It's
Mhm.
not really a movie that they think you should watch. It's a movie they paid for, so they need you to stream it.
Mhm.
That is a big difference of it.
Mhm. Well, I just want to put in a note about DVDs because most of the big movies still come out on DVD and libraries carry them. But any of the shows on the subscription sites you cannot get. So that is going to be a lost. That's going to be lost over time, and it's going to be a huge loss because they're making some amazing, I think, amazing content. So it's
You are so
really,
right.
yeah, because it's not, there's no access unless you pay for it. And it's really super sad. Denise.
And without a doubt, Netflix is going to go under.
Mhm.
And they're going to be gone. Those things are just going to be gone. And that is horrible. And another thing is like a lot of these movies I owned on DVD that I bought in the 90s and I still watch them. Like that was Magnolia. Like I went in my closet and I got my Magnolia. and I popped it in, and I didn't have to ask someone if I could watch it. Like, oh, please, Paramount Plus, won't you please have Magnolia for me? No, I had it. And when I watched those 160 movies, I got most of them from the Columbus Library. I was living in Columbus, Ohio, and they had almost all of them or could get me them. There's a Denzel Washington movie called Devil in a Blue Dress, and it's comically streaming now. But when I was working on this, I really wanted to see that movie, and they had to get it from another library. It was just like one of those movies that were hard to find.
Mhm.
The library played a big part in me working on this book.
Yeah, I'm just saying that a lot of the streaming services, when or if they go under, we're going to lose their content. Right? Yes, right now we have an abundance of it, but eventually it's going to be difficult to access. Denise asks, do you think Robert Eggers of The Lighthouse is bringing something new?
I got to be honest with you, I haven't seen that movie. I
Okay.
haven't seen it. I considered seeing it, but I gotta tell you, one of the bad parts of watching 160 movies from the 90s is it made me hate new movies so much more that it's really hard for me to watch a new movie. I'm trying. And in my book, I do have the process I go through before I'll watch a movie. But I really like William Dafoe, so I would like I've wanted to see that movie, but it's just hard for me because I
Mhm.
just in my Reality Bites chapter, what I focus on is how characters talk to each other, and that's one of my big problems with now movies. I'm not saying they do this in The Lighthouse, but this is why it's hard for me to watch a movie. Is I don't like when two people are best friends and then they say, "Oh, best friend who I met in seventh grade. It's good to see you since last Tuesday when we both went to work, which we drive to." And people just say things because they are explaining the plot to the audience, and you don't say that to your best friend. And Reality Bites is a perfect example of how they don't do that. It's just friends talking. I believe you that no one talks like that in The Lighthouse. And I 100% believe that The Lighthouse, I'm sure, is a great movie. And I will promise to watch it because I've wanted to. But my rule is I have to hear it from three different sources. That's what I say in the book.
You heard it here, people.
So
You've seen it.
now Tish has caused me to have to see The Lighthouse.
Awesome. Okay, I have a lightning round for you because we only have 2 more minutes. Who was your favorite actor of the 90s?
Ethan Hawke.
Who was your favorite actress?
Um, oh, that's harder. I'm gonna say Cheryl Lee because she's so good in Fire Walk with Me that she tops everything. So sorry, that's a bad answer. But beyond that, I would probably say Patricia Arquette.
Wow. Director
Quentin Tarantino.
and sound, not sound, but like music, like a composer.
James Newton Howard, the score for The Prince of Tides. It is really good. It's hard for me. I can't really say it's the best because that would be a ridiculous statement because True Romance also has a great score. But The Prince of Tides, I freaking love it. I love that score so much. I listen to it all the time.
I'm so glad you didn't say John Williams.
Well, I don't cover a Spielberg movie. Schindler's List is in the short essays in the back because obviously that's like a movie on itself. But I felt like Spielberg, he's doing okay with that. He doesn't need me to save his art. I think people will know about Spielberg. John Williams, kind of the same. He's going to be just fine without me.
Okay, last minute. What is up next for you? What can we look forward to?
I am in the middle of working on another Twin Peaks book. That's sort of my bread and butter. I'm doing a book about the music of Twin Peaks. So I've been interviewing the people who played on the soundtracks and how they put it on television, and it's been pretty interesting.
Mhm.
So I'm doing that, and people can get all my books at tuckerdspress.com. That's my publishing company as well that I run with David Bushman. We have all kinds of pop culture books. Um, so check us out because we're just the little guy, and it makes every book like I package, I ship, and if you buy straight from me, I sign. But also, where's the bookstore where they have signed books too?
that's Aesop's Fable. I'll put that link in my recap email, but I will send people to your site as well. Scott, this has been fabulous. It's so fascinating. Thank you so much for taking your time to talk about your book, but also to bring us back to where, was it 30 years ago now?
I know. It's crazy.
Feeling a little old, but this has been really fascinating, and I hope everybody enjoyed it just as much as I did. And well, I hope to see you all again soon. Scott, have a wonderful night. We look forward to more Twin Peaks from you.
All right. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for your kindness. Kindness really matters. And we all had like this hour of kindness and debating, and we're all just fine. And that's the way it should be. So thank you.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful night, everybody.